creativity. And yay for WHEAT. That's an organization in Winnipeg that teaches expressive arts. And yay for the universe and WHEAT and everyone involved in putting together this today. What I'm talking about is from one course, one assignment from one professor at the Indigenous Art Therapy Institute. And why did I pick this one? Because it kind of integrates some different bits that I wish you, if you're considering doing art therapy projects, and if you're considering doing self-care, self-healing projects, or if you're considering offering these kind of creativity workshops, or using material like this for research. That's also something you might want to consider. So there's different ways this knowledge and insight and process can be put into the world, and good things will come. Good things will come from it all. So this particular course is being taught by Alana McLeod. A wonderful, wonderful course, and I've almost finished it, but I wanted to do this infomercial. So the Indigenous Art Therapy Certificate Program from WHEAT is now being delivered because of C19, maybe one of the few things we could ever say thank you for from C19 is all this program is now on the web. So I've been able to take these courses here in Prince George, and the teachers are in Nova Scotia, Toronto, Vancouver, different places across Canada. All the teachers in this program are Indigenous, and so far my experience has been every one of them has been flexible, creative, respectful, everything I could have dreamt for. So if y'all are thinking of taking courses from the Indigenous Art Therapy Certificate from WHEAT, they also have a certificate, they have a diploma, and then you can also just take single courses to learn, something that you might want to consider with your clients. So here's the thing, material culture as knowledge gathering. Alana McLeod is an Indigenous woman. My belief is she has an MA in art, and then also has an art therapy program training from, I think, Create, and I'm sure it's here in her notes, from Create, which is like a Vancouver Art Therapy Institute, but in Toronto. So, she asked us for this particular thing. She also led us through small incremental tasks and exercises, and then this sort of bigger project. Again, one of our core beliefs in art therapy is you only ever set up your clients to succeed, right? To feel competent, to feel okay. We never want to set them up that we're asking something too big, too quick, or that feels too involved to them. So, for example, in another video I've recently made, I talked about the person who was guiding the group, who was doing 100 wonderful things. But my brain couldn't grasp this idea of how she wanted us to fold some paper just to make some booklet thing. We don't want to set clients up to have even a moment of tension or awkwardness or shame or inadequacy. Right? I'm old and tough, so this was nothing for me. But, you know, when you're working with vulnerable people, right, you don't want them sitting there thinking everybody else seems to understand what she's saying about folding and I don't. Right? Because the product doesn't matter. The process is what matters, and the communication of insight and knowledge is what matters. The communication between the client and you, the therapist, or between the client and or you and the client and the others in the group. If you're facilitating a group, there's a lot of things that you really, really want to grow and facilitate. You never, ever want to grow, facilitate, set people up to like, damn, how does this work? Right? So, no one at WHEAT has done that so far to me. I love it. Going back to this one thing, she had us, and I won't go into the details of it, but trust building exercises for the group, checking in with how we're feeling on that particular day, talking about the reading and the writing. Then she had us do maybe, I'm not sure if this is the sequence, but some journaling exercises, some sort of quick and dirty doodle art exercises, and so on, to build towards the bigger project. So, the bigger project for me I'm using, and I'll show you it in a moment, but one of the teachers in this program is Dr. Farah Jean Gravelin, and you've probably heard of me talk about her before. I've teased her and said, I think I'm stalking you, because even when she's at the opposite end of the nation, I end up interacting with her. Like, that's, what are the odds, right? So Dr. Farah Jean Gravelin, as you all know, has published 2 books. She's in the process of publishing her 3rd. She's taught at different universities and contexts, and I actually met her, I don't know. She said 20 years ago, I'm not sure, that seems so long ago, but 20 years ago we may have met at conferences or workshops, and also teaching at UNBC in the Indigenous Studies program. She's one of the few people that I know of in Canada who have a doctorate, who are Indigenous, who are feminist, who are very comfortable talking about and teaching about the micro and the macro, right? I have only good things to ever say about Dr. Farah Jean Gravelin, but for the specific moment, this is what I want to speak about, is in one of the courses that I took with her for this week, Indigenous Art Therapy thing, was about using her way of kind of talking about the medicine wheel. So I want to just ponder this to you, my social work students, in social work with victims of abuse, or in courses like family counseling, to talk about the diversity. As a settler person, sometimes people go, oh, the First Nations way of talking about this. Well, if you think of the entire planet of Earth and all the Indigenous peoples, because that's 10,000 Indigenous people's perspectives. But in India, there might be 700 communities or groups or nations or however, tribes, right? And so please don't say the Indigenous perspective. You want to say Indigenous perspectives. And if you're a settler, I would advise you to say, it seems to me there's a possible Indigenous perspective of this, but also that. Don't get too strident as a settler person. Say, oh, I know how the Ojibwe see this. No, you don't, right? You may be able to say, I read these 3 books from Ojibwe authors who've talked about this, and all 3 of them seem to have that perspective, right? That's what you know, right? Identify who told you it, who taught you it, and where it came from. So, Farah Jean Gravelin and Alana McLeod, that's what this is that you're about to see. And I found the process very interesting, and that's part of why I wanted to share it. So, this is so far actually 2 art projects. So this, I identify as white bush trash. And how would I represent white bush trash? Blue jeans, right? So the way I came up with that idea or concept was she had us journal about something that brought up blue jeans for me. And I was like, So then that led into the next task or exercise or directive or invitation. There's different words for it. So I had the blue jean thing as a white bush trash person. And then I've got here the dead parts from the trees that are outside in my yard. And here I have these sort of needles or spikes in us. Up here I have white folk at the back. This is what I wish you'd see. Settler white folks, and then black, yellow, red, brown, the different cultures and groups of the planet. And also, I'll link this in a minute. And here's time. Indigenous folks, 500 years of oppression. And also for me, the more micro of the oppression of a life, the oppression of a relationship. So time is very important. So blue jeans, working class, white bush trash, different Indigenous ways here, and reflecting on that. So hold all that information. Now here is Farah Jean Gravelin's. I've tried to use, and I'm not so perfect in my rendition. This is still in process. So Farah Jean Gravelin has her version or offering or expression of the medicine wheel. Sometimes that can be very different for different Indigenous groups. And I'm not even sure that all Indigenous groups had a medicine wheel. It's sort of like, oh, sometimes you thought, they're all into feathers. They all have powwows. They all have sweetgrass, right? There's a list of things that settlers may have. Oh, that's how that works. With a good heart and good intentions, right? But we only have maybe a glossing, and we always have to be a little cautious. So, my understanding is there are various ways to do an Indigenous, a version of Indigenous interpretation of the medicine wheel. This is fiery genes that I have utilized to kind of integrate with something I was trying to express for Alana McLeod's material culture as knowledge gathering. So, and a sort of thing I had was I loved what Fire Jean was teaching us from her course about her version of a medicine wheel. And I'm trying to integrate that. So what would that mean to me if I took it to the deepest place in my heart and soul? How would I live that? So here's Prince George, which is where I've been living for almost 21 years. And Prince George is quite like Sudbury, the other place I live, to be, I believe to be a blue-collar, working-class woman in Sudbury or Prince George. There's definite parallels, right? So it's not like I was in one world and I came to a complete other. I've often said Prince George and Sudbury, from where I was located as a working class, from that stance, they're ugly twin sisters who are oppressed. Resource boom-bust communities. So the physical doing and the north, east mental and knowing, the south is spiritual and intuition, and the west is emotional relating. And this would be my space of insertion, or most quick comfort place of how do I open into this. So she's got here, feminist, how do we relate to each other? The personal is political, and restoring self in relation to others. This is me. I belong here. This is good. Yes, 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 yeah. And then over here also, reconnecting the ecological interdependence. Earth is our mother. What do we do? And the ecological analysis of what's going on. Up here, getting it the right way. Up here we have our lived experiences. How do we know what we know? Walking our talk, recreating our inner landscape. And down here, Indigenous, what do we believe? We are not alone. And reawakening ancestral resiliency. So, Fire Jean's full rendition of all this is much, much more complex. And I believe she's writing her third book, investing more into this. I want to be really clear. This is just a quick kind of how I'm trying to integrate it to this assignment for Alana on material culture as knowledge gathering. As I gathered all the materials and tried to express myself, I came to some epiphanies. So this is in front of that, and here I am, blue collar, white trash, trying to live this world. Where would I enter into true, authentic, deep alliances with Indigenous folks, right? And I would start here and kind of expand this way, right? I offer you this to make the point that through the process of constructing this, I came to know myself more deeply as a settler person, and I believe I've come to speak more comfortably about what I don't know, what I'll never know, how I know, what I care about, where am I prepared to step up and be a strong voice, and where am I in other contexts going to just step right back and make sure I don't overstep my true knowledge. So, here I am, white at the back, different ethnocultural groups represented by these different colors of thread. Fire Jean's format, Prince George, blue collar. I also have down here, I have 5 of these also, as I have up here 5, because there's also the blue collar working person who's black or identifies as third generation Canadian Chinese, right? So I put 5 here because it isn't, of course, just our ethnicity or our skin color or our religion that the world sees and utilizes to put us into some story or not, right? And the class issues are going to be differently experienced. We've talked about intersectionality in another video. So now what I'm working on, and I haven't finished it yet. I'm still working on it. Here's the back. And so kind of this is an, let's say 99% indigenous-y kind of stance, like, right? And then over here I'm trying to go like, settler or white folk who are working class. How do we think about the indigenous world, and where, what are some of the images or stereotypes that, or myths or beliefs that deserve to be ruptured or reframed or disassembled or completely trashed? So I found these papers. I call them designer papers. So the time thing again for me, what it means to be a white bush trash person right now at this time when there's the children's bodies been found. Something like 6,500 bodies have been found at residential school church sites. And so there's all, the horror of what happened there to many of those children, but also no matter what anyone says or doesn't say, all of those children should have been brought back to their families, and their families should have had a clear understanding of what did happen. So if a child did die of pneumonia or something that could have happened to anyone, anywhere, either way, the parents and the family deserve to know. And that is another one to me of the many, 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 many sins and distortions and horrors and downright evils that the Catholic faith and some other faiths have inflicted on indigenous peoples all over planet Earth. So, time. Right now is a time of truth and reconciliation. Right now is a time of truly having some of those tough and uncomfortable and maybe bitter and rageful and sometimes irreconcilable, right? Conversations with all the different indigenous peoples all over the world. Right? So time is always a story in there. And I've got some weird maps in the background again, and I've purposely put them sideways and upside down and sort of pieces of them around this. This here in the center is, again from one of Fire Jean Gravelin's teaching, was to go out and find natural resources to make our colors. So here we have blueberry and mustard and jam and crushed leaves and coffee. And so talking about material culture, this is again material culture. What does material culture mean? The stuff. The stuff. Indigenous folks might be more likely to use, of course, natural things from their natural environment traditionally, right? I can use that because as white bush trash people, I do have some affections and clarities and so on. I knew the blueberry juice would stain because I picked blueberries as a kid and sold them on the side of the road to make some money. So I know about or Saskatoons on your hand and your face. So yeah, you could use that to make art. Very interesting, very substantive. But also, as a white bush trash person, I'm accustomed to using strange metal things in the background. Like, well, how did I put this together? This is not a strange metal thing that I just happen to have in the shed, right? That's what is a white bush trash settler person. And then also I have here, like lemonade, sometimes that sense of humor that indigenous and settler people often share that's not always sure even what to call irony, laughter at how stupid some of the beliefs are that we were talking earlier about Christopher Columbus being a discoverer. No, you weren't. You were an invader, a creep monster, a sex abuser. Right? That
another infamous colonizer.
Right, yeah. So it's kind of there's the one outrageous version and then the other that's more true and real. And sometimes there is a little bit of sort of bitter, scorching laughter about, what did you just say? Oh, patriarchal, racist, colonizers, a misogynist voice, right? So the lemonade there, and some other dimensions that I'm still kind of pondering. Over here I have I found a piece of paper that has arrows on it, and so I was kind of playing with this to put, we often have seen the Hollywood movie kind of thing of the Indians. Indians always have arrows, and they're always shooting the settler people, right? So the stereotype of that, I was thinking about that. Then I was also thinking about the arrows that are involved in maps, like go here, go there, in regards to truth and reconciliation. And I also was thinking of cupids, where once you start to love another group or another culture or another truth, there is that love in it, right? Like comradely love, the solidarity love. And as a person who's always identified as white bush trash, but then very, like in my late teens, to identify as feminist, and then to identify as eco-feminist, my eco-feminist, white bush trash, social worker, social justice self loves Fyra Jean Gravelin, or bell hooks, or people who are fighting the same fight as me, maybe not always on the same day or in the same ways, or we all have our own location from which we most boldly speak. But I believe Donald Trump is as much my enemy as he's your enemy, and we should hold hands when we march, right? So that's a stray cat. I also identify as a stray cat. Sometimes among settler folks, I don't really, although obviously I am settler, and they look at me and they know I'm settler, but pondering how do we talk about that, right? As white allies, where do I step into this? So going back to my original point here, this course of material culture as knowledge gathering, as I did each of those steps, I asked myself questions, and then I pondered how will I express my answer. The next thing that I'm going to do with all of this, I'm going to take photos of it, and then I'm going to write from my location as a person who is living perhaps on stolen land or land that has been unceded in this specific town, talking about Hedley-Tene Indigenous people, sometimes called Kara people, Delka, and also talking about, here I am teaching, and in some of my classes, there are 12 different First Nations or Indigenous folks represented in one class. So again, how do I talk about that? And one of the conflicts that partially helped me kind of thinking about this is, right now, as a settler person, I'm watching the Wet'suwet'en who are trying to block a pipeline. One group who identifies as Wet'suwet'en and who feels they belong and they're entitled and they're righteous, and they are, to talk as a band council using democracy and so on to vote in their leaders. They have said, we're Wet'suwet'en, this is Wet'suwet'en land, and we want the pipeline. Some of them. These other ones are saying, we are Indigenous and we are Wet'suwet'en and we speak for the community and we do not want the pipeline. So as a settler kind of looking at all that, I keep reading and thinking, and a lot of people send me things on Facebook, and students have told me stories, and I kind of don't know. I want to be brave and useful, but I also don't know where might I even step into that story, right? Because it's not my business to speak one way or the other, right? So pondering all that. So I hadn't had all of these things come to the forefront of my mind until I went through these steps in this course with Alana McLeod, talking about the material culture and the knowledge we have gathered. I have gathered the knowledge in my body of what it feels like to be wearing jeans and a t-shirt and to be 14 or 15 and to be hitchhiking into town because you don't have a car. That's my real life experience. And I feel a real sisterhood or affinity to an Indigenous woman said, who would say, when I hitchhike, I feel afraid for my life. I don't know who's going to pick me up. Well, I felt that same fear. Obviously, on the highway tours here we have in northern BC, it's way more fearful. And the more times you do it, it's more fearful. And we're all more conscious now than I was when I was 40 years ago or something. Anyway, we didn't have as much understanding of pedophiles and rapists and how an ordinary guy can be, of course, Ted Bundy, right? So I didn't have all that in my 14-year-old mind when I put up with him. I was like, I want to go to town and spend some money, right? Now I look at it as a massive potential of horror story, making yourself vulnerable. So I guess in summary, what I want to say is if you ever get a chance to take these kind of courses, do it. Ponder some of the things I've said here in this as a white bush trash person. Many of our students are white bush trash, or first generation people who live. I still have dreams of being trailer trash. I actually had one last night about my trailer kept falling over in my dream. A house trailer, but it kept falling over. So I'm still processing what that dream might mean. I guess I'll conclude this with, we can come to know things in various ways. Knowledge can be realized, articulated, manifested, sedimented, layered, communicated, offered up through many processes. It's not just about spending a year in the library. It's also maybe considering doing journaling or art or other ways, music, quilts, that can cultivate knowledge and bring it to the forefront and make it something shareable. And it is knowledge. So I want to say to people in academia who said to me along the way, oh, you're the one who does that little thing with the little poetry books? Yeah, that's me, right? And don't be so condescending. Some people consider knowledge only comes from research, which involves, statistics or charts or, controlled interviews, those kind of things. This also is knowledge gathering and articulating. And I've often felt that, and in many of the recent years, I've totally felt that. But now hanging out with Indigenous people, all the teachers are Indigenous, as I said, and almost all the students are, my heart is emboldened and enlarged by being this way. This is often how Indigenous people do research. This is scholarship. This is the real thing. And we have to be really clear about, don't be so arrogant to say research is this, not that. That's perhaps your colonized brain, your diminished brain. And the video we made earlier today about the medical book, I would make the possible claim, that's a collection of settler folks using art and some similar ways of explicating what did you know, what was your experience, what was your story, who do you want to know that story. And perhaps a traditional Indigenous way of using materials, using trees or logs or wood or stone or carving or bone and carving. There's multiple ways to identify data, collect data, capture and display the data, share with who you wish it to be shared with, and an example of a moment where I went, ah! Alana asked us, I would like you to, something like this, I would like you to consider the story you have, and then consider what aspects may have been decoy story, right? And I thought, for example, waitressing for 13 years, how would I present myself to the customers? How would I decoy with management? And so on. As someone who at the time was doing like women's studies and involved with the women's movement, waitressing in a strip joint, I had to create a decoy identity. And I thought, oh, that's so lovely. Use that word decoy identity or decoy. What was the decoy story? Because obviously I wasn't going to say to men in a strip joint, I hate you. I hate what's going on here. You're all repulsive perverts. You're sick bastards. Because I was living on my tips and I needed the money, and many women do, to pay their way through school. You have to do things, whether it's, flipping burgers at McDonald's if you're a vegan, or, being a feminist in a place like that. So, I know I've kind of taken you on different little side jaunts, as I always do, and then once I get excited, I go even on more side jaunts. I hope this has been useful to you to build your courage, and if you're a settler person, to consider, how do I want to be with all these stories and truths and insights as a settler, pondering truth and reconciliation, pondering what's my moment in this story, pondering where am I prepared to take some risks, with you know, Indigenous or people who are different than you, and you're trying to be their ally. I have 6 cats and a puppy in this room, so I think the cat is actually right now overtaking my commentary, which means I should come to a close. Thank you to Wheat. I hope to make more like this to kind of do little infomercials of what I've been enriched by. I would like you to consider this video a declaration of affection and imperfection and openness and humility. I hope I've done a fair job of expressing what Fiery Jean Gravelin would wish to be expressed through her work, or what Alana wishes through her work, Alana McLeod. Hopefully this at least opens up some conversations for every person who's watching this video. Thank you for showing up. Thank you, Carlene, for being my Steven Spielberg today.
No problem.